So as Waddle was saying, and not that you would have an insight now on the way the Commanders are being run or what they're saying about Jayden, but when you were the coach of a team and you guys would get together and you would have a player who you weren't sure if he was going to play or not, what went into some of the thinking between listing a guy as day-to-day and week-to-week, and how much of it is trying to misdirect your opponent?
A little bit of both, it really is. I mean, you have to be truthful to a point, obviously because of all the stuff that's going on outside of football. And, they're being truthful because it's week to week. He could play this week. But if you try to read between the lines, you read too much into it. If it's week to week, that means this week he's probably not. So you just got to be careful and just kind of got to take the reports as you get them and see what happens coming up on Tuesday and then Wednesday. So there's going to be a lot of naysayers, a lot of doubters, and there's just some people that are so optimistic. So like I said, you just got to be smart with it.
Do you handle this situation, in your opinion, Ron, differently because this is a rookie who is the foundation of what they're going to do going forward, or it doesn't matter who he is and what his situation is? If he can go, he's going to go.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it really doesn't matter what the situation is. If he can go and he can protect himself, and that's probably the biggest thing he's got to be able to do is protect himself, and if he can protect himself, then you want to put him on the field. Yeah. He's proven to be an excellent football player already. Done a great job in terms of his learning and his growth and his assimilation to the team as their starting quarterback. So he's somebody that if he can play and protect himself, they'll put him on the field.
And I was going to ask you that as a member of the media, but someone with a very educated eye for all of this. When you see Jayden Daniels and Caleb Williams, what do you see?
Well, I'll be honest. I see two different guys at two different points in their young careers already. Jayden really fit in very quickly, assimilated very, very quickly. I think there's a little bit more of a learning curve for Caleb. And the reason being is Jayden had played under 4 different systems of offense. Caleb played in the same system for 3 years. Jayden had played 5 years of college football. So he has a lot more football experience under his belt. They both played at a very high level, both had very high levels of success. So, but because of that, Jayden, I think, is just a little bit ahead. I mean, Caleb had a couple of first 2 games were really, big struggle. Jayden came out firing. What was interesting, though, because I picked Caleb. I thought Caleb, preseason pick for Rookie of the Year, and the reason being is he's got a great group of players around him, great playmakers, guys that he can get the ball to very quickly. In Washington, we weren't really quite sure what they're going to have. Now we see it, and those guys have really stepped up for him. Then, they both guys, can they be protected? I think Jayden's offensive line is a little bit ahead of where you see Chicago's right now, although they're coming together and they've done a great job so far. And then both teams, which was real interesting, the Bears' defense is ahead of Washington's defense, in my opinion, just based on what I've seen. And that's a rookie's really good friend right there. And by that, I mean, they're taking the ball away at a tremendous rate, and they're getting great field position because of it. And you could argue that they had the biggest impact in their first 2 games, really, as far as setting up the Bears for wins because of their play. So that's kind of how I saw them. And I really do think that those 2 guys are going to be the Larry Bird and the Magic Johnson of the NFL.
Ron Rivera joining us, former Bear player, linebacker, of course, coached with the Bears on a couple of different occasions and was the defensive coordinator the year the Bears, of course, went to the Super Bowl. So who do you like? Would you, if your coaching future depended on it, Ron, would you want Larry Bird or would you want Magic Johnson? So would you take this is your career we're talking about. Do you want Caleb or do you want Jayden?
Well, I mean, the beauty of it now is if I'm going to go off of what I've seen and what's happened, then I would take Jayden right off the bat. But going into the season with the number 1 pick, I'd have probably gone with Caleb. I mean, it's one of those things that you sit there and you can now second guess it. You can have hindsight and make a prediction, just like I said, based off of what I said.
Well, so what made you, like, I know he's ahead now, but the way Caleb is and the skill set that he has, what has made you change your opinion on that?
Well, like I said, when you really break it down and say, God, why is Jayden having so much success? The big reason, because from what I've seen, is the young man, had basically had 4 different styles of offense he's had to learn, and he's done very well in all of them. Where again, Caleb was always in the same offense. Excuse me. Remember, he had the same head coach that whole time. They transferred together, and so he never had to relearn anything. Whereas Jayden had to relearn each time, and I think because of that, I think that's really kind of helped him in terms of his learning and his growth.
It's interesting too, Ron, and again, from an arm's length distance, it feels like I've said, watching, especially as you mentioned Caleb's struggles early on, it was like with Shane Waldron, they just threw everything out there and realized that he's a very mature young man, and if he even has some difficult moments, he'll be able to, to guide himself through that because of that maturity and that talent. It just feels like the situation is different, not just the level of experience, but maybe in Washington, Cliff Kingsbury has put together a package of plays that really fit his skill set, as opposed to throwing everything out there and then paring back. He put a small thing out there.
No, and that's a great point, because, I had an opportunity to talk to Cliff Kingsbury, and, one of the things that he and I talked about was what he did to figure out what style of offense he was going to go ahead and marry Jayden with. And it was a lot what we did when we first drafted Cam Newton. We went to the people at Auburn and said, hey, Mike Shula and Rob Straczynski, my coordinator and quarterback coach, they go down there and visit with them, and, hey, what's he do best? What does he like to do? And, hey, they took those things and they kind of married them with what we did offensively. Well, that's what Cliff did. He went down to LSU and said, hey, what's this guy best at? He took about 20 plays and he's incorporated them into his style of offense. And, so these things were very familiar to him when he got started. And it wasn't like, you had to have all this stuff thrown at you and then you pare it back.
Yeah. Ron, candidly, are you resentful in the least when you look at them getting this quarterback in Jayden Daniels and knowing your list of quarterbacks? We went through them during crosstalk, and no shot against Sam Howell or Carson Wentz, right. And then you had Alex Smith after the leg injury and everything. And I could list a few other with Taylor Heineke. Those aren't franchise quarterbacks, and you lose your job over that. Is there any resentment now that the year that you're out, they get a franchise quarterback?
No, there's just envy. I wish I could have had one of those two guys. I'm telling you right now, like I said, those two guys, I think, are going to compete against each other for a long time. And as long as they stay healthy, those two guys really are going to become the faces of the NFL. I mean, they're young, they're dynamic, they are good teams around them right now. I really do think that both teams are going to continue to grow with their quarterbacks as well. So it's going to be some exciting times in both Chicago and Washington. So am I bitter about it? Heck no. I'm just, like I said, I'm envious. I wish I had that opportunity. I'd had one of those two guys. Because this league is a quarterback-driven league. Okay? I mean, if you don't have a franchise guy or a guy that's close to franchise, you're going to always be struggling uphill. And, and people say, oh, well, this guy was a franchise guy at one time. Yeah, but you know what? If you can't sustain it and maintain it, you're just going to fall to the wayside.
And that's what we love about you. No bitterness, no jealousy, just envy. How truly tough was it being the head coach of the Redskins? And you're chuckling. When you first get there, there's all the problems behind the scenes with Daniel Snyder. Then the ownership change. You then go through a health battle of your own, and you're battling cancer. How tough was the entire journey as the head coach with everything else you had to deal with off the field?
I think the hardest thing more than anything else was a lot of that stuff pulled me away from my day-to-day coaching responsibilities, and I kept getting hit with managerial things. I had to manage this situation, manage those circumstances, manage dealing with that crisis, and that was the hard part. That was probably the thing that really I found not to be a lot of fun. I mean, this really was the hardest set of circumstances I've ever had to deal with during my head coaching tenure in the NFL. And that was things that, first of all, I wasn't here for. You know what I'm saying? All that stuff happened before 2020 when I took over. And, and when we were in pandemic, when there wasn't an opportunity for a lot of these things to get in the way, we win the division. So my first year, we kind of put things together and we thought, okay, here we go. And then the next year we had a whole bunch of things that happened that came up that was put on my plate. And, the distractions continued. So that was the hard part. It really was. But, that's kind of what I signed up for too, because I kind of knew what I was getting into. I didn't realize the extreme of it though.
So, Ronnie, if you had to go back into the lab and get prepared to do something you love to do, and that's be a defensive play caller, which of these offenses would be more difficult to defend right now? The one that Jayden Daniels is orchestrating, or the one that Caleb Williams is orchestrating?
Wow. Because I'll tell you right now, the thing that, and again, I've had a chance to start, and I have spent time watching both offenses. There's a lot of similarities. There really are. And I think right now where Caleb is where I kind of thought he would start at. So, he's just slightly behind the gun. I think they're both very difficult because there's so many similarities. They're really not, they're really not that much different. I might give the running game edge towards the Commanders a little bit because, I was fortunate enough that, we drafted Brian Robinson and he's a beast, and he really is. And I really like the way he runs the ball. And the thing that both these guys are beginning to realize is that their superpower, their extra weapon, is their ability to run as quarterback. So to me, you're talking pretty much about the same style of guy. Both those guys have tremendous arms. They're good decision makers. The one thing that I'm starting to see now a little bit more from Caleb is he's getting the ball out of his hands quicker. And that's one of the things that, that I'm talking with Cliff Kingsbury that they did right off the bat. And that was, they put Jayden in this position where he can get the ball out of his hands and get it into the receiver's hands and let them make their plays. Well, early on, Caleb it almost seems like he was second guessing, trying to be perfect. Now when you watch him, man, he's just making great decisions, getting the ball out. If not, he's using his ability to scramble to make those plays last a little bit longer, to extend them, give his guys a chance to get open down there. DJ Moore gets it right off the bat. Keenan McCardle, getting him back on the field is nothing but helped out this young quarterback. So with all the weapons that both guys have, you pick your poison. You can, in my opinion, pick your poison, because I think both of them are very difficult offenses to have to defend. Just like you would say the same thing when you're sitting there looking at Kansas City.
Yeah. Well, one of the criticisms of Kingsbury has been that things work well early and then teams get wise to what they're doing. That has been a trend, or at least that's been kind of the narrative about him. Do you think that's a fair criticism? And why, if in fact that is the case, why does that happen?
I don't think it's a fair criticism. I really do. Just because of the fact that this is a player's game now today. You can call whatever offense you want. And if you don't have the players, you're not gonna have success. Well, he had good players in Arizona. Okay, he's got better players here in Washington. Caleb has better players in Chicago. I mean, that's how I see it. I mean, I really do. I mean, you look at what Andy's been able to do for as long as he's been able to do in Kansas City. Well, he's got the quarterback, and then you sprinkle in a couple of those guys, like Kelsey. That's always been around, and they always find a way to get the running game going. Because it's a player driven. If you have players at the skill positions, if you can protect your quarterback, you're going to have success. We did it for 7 years in Carolina with Cam Newton, and then unfortunately he gets hurt and changed our whole dynamics. That's the thing everybody has to understand, is that, again, if you have the players, which they do in Chicago, which they do in Washington, they're young. It's a young group. I mean, and the reason it's a young group is because you got a young quarterback. You got veteran playmakers around, but you got a young quarterback. And as they continue to get more and more comfortable, they're going to get better. They really are. And that's why, the statement I said is, Heck, we could be looking at Larry Bird and Magic Johnson for the next couple of years.
You led me into two places with that answer. Ron Rivera joining us. It's Waddle and Sylvie on ESPN 1000. There's the second time you mentioned Magic Johnson. He now owns the Commanders or is part of the group. Did you ever get some time with Magic, and what was it like as part of that ownership group in your last year?
It was cool. I mean, I had an opportunity to talk with him, and you know, the guy's really about winning. I mean, he's been around it his whole career, from the time he grew up playing basketball to now as an owner, not just of the Commanders, but you know, he's also a part owner in the Dodgers. He's a part owner in the women's soccer team in Washington. So this is a guy that's got his hands into and fingers into a lot of things, and he's really enjoying it. And his ability to be a winner is big.
And then you mentioned Andy Reid. I believe like you were a part of his staff for a few years. If I would have told you then that Andy Reid would still be coaching today, and not only would he still be coaching, but he'd be on top of the game, viewed as probably the best coach in the league, what would you have said?
Yeah, that's right. I mean, I was fortunate. I was on his original staff for 5 seasons. You know, and 4 of those 5 seasons we were in the playoffs. 3 of those 5 seasons we went to the NFC Championship game. It was his 6th year. You know, I'd come to Chicago in 6 years when he, you know, got to the Super Bowl. And so you always knew he was going to be successful. You always knew he was going to do things the right way. You know, had a little reset at the end of his Philly career and went down to Kansas City and got it restarted. And look at him now, because he has the quarterback and he knows how to use the quarterback. Mm-hmm. That's the thing that I think everybody's got to appreciate. You know, and you could say the same thing about Coach Belichick. He had the quarterback. You find that guy and stay true to what you believe in, you can be successful.
Hey, Ron, in your new role in the media, have you had a chance to sit down with our former teammate Jim Harbaugh yet?
No, in fact, you know, there's a good chance I'm going to have I believe it's their November 10th game here at SoFi Stadium. So I'm pretty excited about that. And if I do get the game, I'll most certainly give him a holler.
Okay.
That's great. Yeah. All right. Now the $1 million question before we let you go. Who are you rooting for this week? The Bears or the Commanders?
I can't hear you guys.
Come on now.
Veteran play there.
Who'd you play for?
Hey, I play for the Bears, and I love the fact that I played for the Bears. But I'm going to tell you what, the $1 million question is, will Jayden Daniels play? That's the question.
Yeah. And if you had to guess, what would you say?
If I had to guess, I'll tell you right now, you know, from my perspective and having been a head coach, I would tell my team we're preparing for Jayden Daniels. I mean, that's what I would tell my team right off the bat. We're preparing for him. Because Marcus Mariota is as good an athlete as Jayden. Now, he thinks a little different from Jayden, and he may make some decisions different, but there's not going to be a lot of changeover in terms of, oh, you know, they can't do this with Marcus. Marcus is a very good football player, and you know, you get to see a little bit of it when he had to come in and replace him. I thought he played well for you know, being a primary backup.
Ron, great stuff. We always appreciate your time.
Yeah, thank you, Ron.
All right, guys. Well, hey, talk to you guys later. And, you know, as they always say, go Bears, baby.
Go Bears.
There you go.
A little insight
there. Very good.
Right.
There he is, Ron Rivera, former coach of the Commanders. And again, he had some bad luck with the quarterbacks. That usually is what gets the coach. Yeah. And the defensive coordinator here and a player here. And he's won Coach of the Year in the National